The faint scent of smoke still clung to his skin. Room 213 in Alder Creek General Hospital was like any other long-term recovery room, sterile, dimly lit, a quiet hum of machines keeping time with fading breaths. But to Clara Jensen, this room had become a sacred space. She didn't believe in ghosts, yet something about the man lying in the bed made her feel as though she was never truly alone when she was near him. The nurses called him Patient 04. Clara called him Logan. That wasn't his real name, of course. No one knew that. When he was pulled from the ruins of a collapsed downtown warehouse 6 weeks ago, he had no ID, no wallet, and no known next of kin. Just a half-burned jacket, melted boots, and an old name patch scorched into unreadable letters, except for a faint sea haze, but Clara didn't need a file to name him. Logan felt right. Strong, steady, a name you could lean on. At first, her job had been routine, passive limb exercises, monitoring oxygen levels, adjusting tubes. Nothing personal. But over time, Clara found herself lingering after shifts, pulling the visitor chair closer, just sitting there. She didn't know why. No one came to see him. No one asked about him. A man that brave, she thought, shouldn't have to vanish in silence. Tonight, the corridors outside had gone still, the echo of heels and beeping pagers fading to nothing. Clara dimmed the lights and leaned forward, close enough to hear the soft rise and fall of his breath through the ventilator. She let her fingers brush gently against his hand. "I know you probably can't hear me," she whispered, her voice just above silence, "but I talk to you anyway. I guess that makes me crazy." Her eyes searched his face, so still, so pale, but something in the angle of his jaw, the faint tension in his brow, always made her feel like he was listening, that he was there, somewhere. "I named you Logan," she said with a half-smile. "Hope you don't mind. You looked like a Logan." She reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a small paperback novel. The edges worn, the cover bent. The Things We Leave Behind. She had read it 3 times already, but she still read to him as if he were hearing every word. "You missed a good part yesterday," she said, flipping to a bookmarked page. "The hero found his daughter after the fire, and he cried for the first time in years." Her voice wavered. "I wish someone cried for you," she whispered. "Or even knew you were here." She paused, lowering the book. The words were stuck in her throat now, the kind that didn't come from fiction. The kind that came from her. "I don't know why I keep coming here," she admitted, resting her elbow on the edge of the bed. "But every time I sit with you, I feel like I matter. Like I'm not invisible." She laughed softly and looked away. "Listen to me," rambling to a guy who can't even blink, but he could hear her. Inside that still, broken body, Cole Hayes was listening, and had been, for days. Hurch. The first time her voice cut through the darkness, he thought he was dreaming. The world had been muffled, like hearing underwater, sirens, shouting, and then nothing. But then came Clara, clear, steady, real. Her voice was like a thread, pulling him out of a black sea. He didn't know who she was, but he clung to her. She talked about the hospital, about other patients, about her mother's rose garden and how she missed thunderstorms. She told him she once dreamed of volunteering in Kenya but never left Alder Creek. She told him how hard it was to be seen in a world that looked past people like her. And she talked to him like he was still human. It had kept him sane. "I think I feel too much," she said suddenly, her voice smaller. "And maybe that's why I ended up in a place like this, where no one talks, where no one looks too closely." She wiped her cheek quickly, as if embarrassed to cry in front of him. "I'm not supposed to get attached," she whispered, "but I think I am." She paused, then did something she had never done before. She leaned in close, her lips near his ear. "I wish you'd wake up, Logan. I think you'd be the kind of man who'd understand." She sat back, brushing her fingers across his knuckles one more time. "Sleep well," she said softly, standing up. "I'll be back tomorrow." The door clicked behind her, and in the silence that followed, deep within the unmoving body on the bed, Cole Hayes screamed. Not with his mouth, not with sound, but with thought. he was still here. And now, more than ever, he had a reason to fight. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. But he remembered the fire. It came in flashes. Heat, screams, the roar of collapsing timber. Then, impact, darkness, silence. And then, her voice. Cole Hayes had been trapped inside his own body for weeks, locked in an unresponsive shell, while the world declared him lost. But his mind was alive, bruised, battered, but not broken, and though the memory of the fire burned in fragments, the betrayal was crystal clear. He had been targeted. Before the blaze, Cole had spent months quietly investigating a string of suspicious warehouse fires across the city. As a lieutenant with the Alder Creek Fire Department, he had seen too many accidents that didn't line up. Sprinklers turned off, structural weak points eroded, and digital maintenance logs that had mysteriously vanished. He dug deeper than his superiors approved, and he found something. A link between the fires and construction magnate Brent Maddox, CEO of Maddox Urban Redevelopment, a man with political connections and a reputation too clean to be real. Cole discovered that Maddox had been orchestrating arson to drive out small businesses and acquire land cheap for high-rise developments. And worst of all, the fires were being covered up with the help of corrupt city officials and emergency services consultants. Cole was preparing to go public. He had stored all the data in a secure cloud account and was scheduled to meet a local journalist the night the warehouse burned. Instead, he ended up buried under half a building. His last memory before the collapse was of his radio, cutting to static, then someone shouting from the hallway, "Shut it down!" just before the floor gave way. It hadn't been an accident, but they hadn't finished the job. Cole survived, and now, every second spent listening to Clara's voice brought him back inch by inch. She was his anchor, even if she didn't know it. When she read to him, his mind wandered back to the world he'd almost lost. When she whispered her fears into the room, he stored them like truths, and when she called him Logan, he didn't mind. That name had become his sanctuary, but he knew his real name. And he knew why no one had come looking for him. Brent Maddox had the power to make people disappear. Clara's voice broke through the haze again. "I always thought strength looked like someone who never cried," she said one evening, holding his hand. "But now I think it looks like someone who survives, even when no one sees them." Her words stirred something in him. A pulse. A spark. He focused everything he had, every ounce of strength left in his soul, into a single thought. Move. His fingers twitched. It was small, barely a fraction of a muscle's worth, but it was real. A flicker. The first crack in the wall that held him prisoner. No. The machines didn't beep differently. No alarms sounded. Clara had already left for the night. But something fundamental had shifted. There Ammons. The next day, he tried again. There. This time, his index finger lifted and tapped once, then dropped. A nurse noticed. She logged the movement as involuntary response, but something about it lingered in her mind. 2 days later, Clara returned. She had taken a short leave after a grueling week, but the moment she walked into room 213, something felt different. She sat beside him as always, brushing his forehead gently. "You look like you're trying to say something," she murmured with a soft smile. Cole wanted to scream, "I am." That night, she noticed a faint crease in his brow, a twitch in the corner of his mouth. She leaned in closer. "Logan," she said softly, "if you can hear me, just move your hand, please." Nothing, but she waited, long enough for hope to flicker, and then fade. "I guess I'm just imagining things again," she whispered, standing up. "Good night." Her footsteps faded. Inside, Cole was shouting, "Not yet, not yet. Just a little more time." He wasn't ready, not until he knew she was safe. Because if Brent Maddox realized Cole Hayes was still alive, the fire would be the least of what came next. It started with a clipboard and a smile. The man was well-dressed, charcoal gray blazer, white button-down shirt with faint blue stripes, a hospital visitor badge clipped neatly to his breast pocket. He appeared just before noon, just as the nurses were rotating shifts, walking with the ease of someone used to moving through places unnoticed, but in control. "Excuse me," he said smoothly to the head nurse. "I'm here to discuss a transfer from room 213, the long-term coma case." She blinked, flipping through her charts. "Logan? Patient 04. He corrected gently. "We have confirmation of an open bed at a private facility upstate, Hill Spring Neurological Institute. Far better resources than we have here." The nurse frowned. "You're with Administrative Health Oversight, Division of Special Cases," he replied without hesitation. "Name's Mr. Langston." He smiled again. It didn't reach his eyes. Clara heard about the visit an hour later when she returned early from her lunch break. The mention of a transfer jolted something deep inside her. "Without a physician's sign-off?" she asked, her brow furrowing. The nurse shrugged. "He had clearance, signed forms and everything, claimed it was cleared with Dr. Rains." "Dr. Rains is on sabbatical," Clara snapped, her voice sharper than usual. That night, Clara stayed late. She sat beside Logan, Cole, and stared at the man she had come to know better than most of the living. "I don't like this," she whispered. "Something about that man. It doesn't feel like a rescue. It feels like a cover-up." She glanced at the IV bag, at the pulse monitor, at the call button. "I need to know who you really are." Her fingers reached down and pulled the edge of the sheet tighter. Something hard clinked underneath, metallic and faint. She blinked, then slipped her hand under the mattress fold. A wristband. Burnt around the edges, half melted. It had been hidden under the bed linens. She flipped it over. A faint embossed seal barely survived the damage. ACFD. Alder Creek Fire Department. Her breath caught. "You're a firefighter," she whispered. The next hour was a blur. She slipped out of the room, accessed the staff records computer on the nurse's station, and began searching every firefighter reported missing or presumed dead in the last 2 months. There weren't many. She stopped when she saw the photo. Lieutenant Cole Hayes, last seen at the Maddox warehouse fire. Presumed dead. Body never recovered. The face on the screen was bruised in memory, but unmistakable. The jawline, the mouth, even the scar above the right eyebrow. It was him. Clara's world shifted. Everything made sense, and nothing did. Why he was nameless. Why no one came for him. Why Mr. Langston showed up the moment he began to move. They didn't want him to wake up. They wanted him to disappear. Permanently. Clara barely slept that night. By morning, she had a plan. But she was too late. When she arrived at the hospital, security was already waiting. One of them handed her a folded letter. "I'm sorry, Ms. Jensen," said the hospital director, not even meeting her eyes. "We've received reports that your conduct with patient 04 has crossed professional boundaries." Clara's pulse roared in her ears. "What reports?" He didn't answer. "You're suspending me?" she whispered, pending internal review. She stood there in the lobby, badge turned in, ID clipped from her collar, watching the institution she had served for 5 years close its doors on her, all because she cared. All because she'd found the truth. That evening, as the sun dipped behind Alder Creek's brick buildings, Clara returned to the hospital one last time, not through the front. She slipped through the ambulance bay, climbed the service stairs, and quietly let herself into room 213. Logan, Cole, lay still, unaware, or so she thought. She pulled the chair close, just as always, her fingers trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears burning behind her eyes. "They're gonna move you. I don't know where, but I know it's not safe. I know you're in danger." She pressed her forehead against his hand. "I tried to protect you, Logan. Cole. Whoever you really are. I should have done more." Her shoulders shook. "I told you I loved you. I didn't even know why at the time. Maybe because you were the only one who never looked away. Because you listened." She leaned in closer. "But now I have to say goodbye, and I don't know if you'll even remember me." She stood, wiped her eyes, and bent to kiss his forehead one last time. "I'll never forget you." She turned to go, and missed the smallest flicker of movement beneath the sheet. But Cole didn't. Not anymore. The moment her lips left his forehead, something snapped inside him. "Monoblock!" A spark. A tremor. A storm. Monabach. He wasn't ready to let go. Not of her. Not of her voice. Not of this life. Clara was gone. The door had closed. But Cole Hayes was still here. He summoned everything. Every broken piece of memory. Every word she had ever whispered. Every heartbeat that had held on in silence. And pushed. His right index finger moved. Not much. Less than an inch. But it moved. Glow. Then again. Glow. And again. Glow. Grow lieber Jacquet. Grow wow. Grow wow. Wow. The pulse monitor gave a tiny spike. The night nurse on duty blinked, leaned closer. She checked his vitals, puzzled. Then she noticed the subtle, repeated twitch. The pulse mon, it wasn't reflex, it was intent. Mon, within the hour, the neurology team was called. By sunrise, he had moved all 4 fingers on his right hand. By midday, he blinked in response to questions. By the end of the week, Cole Hayes was no longer a ghost. Thafomre, he was a man returned from the grave. His recovery was slow, painful, and full of small victories. Each finger stretched, each breath unassisted. A speech therapist began working with him by day. At night, he stared at the ceiling, waiting for the voice that had saved him. But Clara didn't return. No one told him what happened to her, and he couldn't ask. Not yet. Mafa, kizha, hoshatakatach. His throat burned every time he tried to form words. His muscles screamed with every attempt to sit up, but he forced himself forward, shup, because now he remembered everything. Shup. The arson, the files, the confrontation, the radio going dead, the shadowed figure who stepped into the hallway at the warehouse and shouted, "Shut it down!" And Maddox's voice, just before it all went dark. "We warned you, Lieutenant. You just had to play hero." 10 days after he regained movement, a nurse brought him a plastic bag labeled with his intake date. Burnt scraps of fabric, a badge melted beyond recognition, and a ruined watch. Only it wasn't a watch. Not entirely. It was a prototype, an encrypted audio/data recorder embedded in a wearable device. A tool Cole had helped test for first responder documentation. It had survived the fire. Barely. He requested access to a tablet. With trembling hands, he connected the device. A password screen appeared. His fingers hovered, then typed in Clara's name. Access granted. Inside, an audio file. Timestamped the night of the warehouse fire. Cole tapped play. "You should have walked away, Lieutenant. This isn't right, Brent. You're playing with lives. You and your damn conscience. You think your little data packet's gonna bring me down? I've already sent it, if anything happens to me. Then it'll be a shame if you don't make it out tonight." Then the sound of boots. A scuffle. A crash. And fire erupting into the background. Cole paused the playback. His hand clenched into a trembling fist. There it was. Proof. By week 3, Cole's voice came back. Hoarse. Broken. But real. His first word wasn't yes, or water, or even help. It was Clara. The nurse blinked. Who? He gritted through the strain. Find Clara Jensen. And when they didn't move fast enough, he wrote it. His fingers still stiff, but his will unstoppable. A shaky scrawl. Please find her. It took 2 days, but finally someone answered. She's no longer with the hospital. Suspended. Internal investigation. No contact available. Cole closed his eyes. Of course. They silenced her too, but she had done enough. Now it was his turn. He contacted a man he trusted, Captain Ross Medina, his former supervisor at the firehouse. Ross, skeptical but loyal, met Cole in secret, eyes wide when he saw him alive. Ross helped deliver the recording to Cole's civil attorney, a woman named Dana Yu, who had fought beside Cole years ago in a wrongful death case against a faulty fire alarm manufacturer. She didn't ask questions, she just got to work. Within 48 hours, Dana had arranged a private media event and leaked the audio to federal investigators. And then Cole stood in front of the world. The auditorium was packed. Journalists from across the state buzzed in anticipation. Rumors of a firefighter who returned from the dead had already made headlines. Cole walked onto the stage slowly, leaning slightly on a cane. Thinner than before. Paler, but taller somehow. Stronger bides. He took the podium, eyes scanning the room. "My name is Lieutenant Cole Hayes," he said, voice gravel but steady. "6 weeks ago, I was declared dead in the Maddox warehouse fire. That was a lie." Cameras flashed. "I was not the victim of an accident. I was the target of a cover-up. I have proof that Brent Maddox—" He paused. "No, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. And for the woman whose voice brought me back when no one else believed I was still alive." He held up a photo. Not of the fire, not of the warehouse, but of Clara, standing beside his hospital bed. "If you're watching this, Clara, I heard you, every word." Across town, in a quiet apartment above a corner bookstore, Clara Jensen sat frozen on her worn-out sofa. The television screen glowed in front of her, casting shadows across the small living room. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands, forgotten. Her heart, however, beat louder than it ever had. She hadn't watched the news in weeks. Ever since she was suspended, she'd tried to disconnect, to protect herself from the world that had so easily turned its back on her. But a message from a former nurse friend had changed that. "Turn on Channel 7, now." And there he was. Not in a bed, not behind a breathing tube. Cole, standing, speaking, alive. She clutched the edge of the couch, breath caught in her throat, unable to process the words until— "If you're watching this, Clara, I heard you. Every word." Her name, Money Mine, spoken aloud before the world by the man she thought she'd lost. Tear rugs. Tears rushed down her cheeks, unstoppable. Not the quiet kind. The kind that came from a heart that had hoped too hard for too long, and finally, felt it was heard. She wasn't crazy, she wasn't imagining the connection. He had heard her. He was alive. The media exploded. Headlines across every outlet read, "Firefighter returns from the dead. Whistleblower survives arson plot. Recording implicates real estate mogul in criminal conspiracy." Brent Maddox's name was everywhere, and not in the way he had controlled for decades. The leaked audio played on every news channel, the smug tone of Maddox's voice slicing through every denial he had tried to maintain. Federal authorities launched an immediate investigation. Cole's legal team submitted the prototype watch and backed it with additional data from cloud backups and encrypted emails. Within 72 hours, a warrant was issued. Maddox fled, but not far. They caught him at a private airstrip outside Alder Creek, trying to board a jet registered under an alias. He was arrested without incident but refused to speak a word. He didn't need to. The evidence was a roar now, and no amount of silence could hold it back. Cole, meanwhile, had refused all interview requests. He made only one statement. "This was never about vengeance. This was about truth. And about the person who reminded me what it means to live." The next morning, Cole disappeared. Not from the world, but from the headlines. No press conference. No corporate handshakes. No drama. Just a single voicemail left in his attorney's phone. "Thank you, Dana. I've got one last thing to do." 2 days later, Clara arrived at her new job, a rural rehabilitation center on the edge of Pine Hollow, a sleepy town miles from Alder Creek. After her suspension, she thought her career was over, but a small clinic director, a former patient's daughter, had seen Clara's compassion firsthand and offered her a second chance. Clara had taken it, not because she'd given up on Cole, but because she had to learn how to live without knowing. Until today. She walked through the staff entrance, coffee in hand, heart still fluttering from last night's broadcast. She tried to bury the emotion, to keep things professional. She almost convinced herself, until she stepped into the patient lounge and froze. There he was, no cameras, no podium, no fanfare, just Cole Hayes. In a simple jacket, jeans, still leaning slightly on his cane, He looked up, their eyes met. She smiled. "I heard you. he said softly. Every word. She dropped her coffee and ran. She didn't say anything at first, just threw her arms around him, her whole body trembling in the warmth of his presence. The scent of burnt pine and antiseptic still lingered on him, but now it smelled like hope. "I thought I lost you," she cried into his shoulder. "You brought me back," he whispered, holding her like he never wanted to let go. "You saved me." They didn't care that people were staring, that the receptionist had tears in her eyes, that the other nurses had frozen in place. This moment was for them, for the silences shared, for the night she waited, for the days he fought to return. Later that afternoon, they sat beneath the willow tree behind the clinic. The air smelled of clover and rain. He told her everything. About Maddox, about the files, about the fire, the voice recording, and the first flicker of movement that began the climb back. "You were the only constant," he said. "In a world where everything burned, you were the one thing that stayed." Clara smiled through tears. "So what now? No more boardrooms, no cameras, no fame," he said. "I want to build something real." He pulled out a folder. Inside were plans: the Hayes Center for Recovery and Resilience, a nonprofit trauma and rehabilitation center for burn victims, firefighters, and whistleblowers, built on truth and on love. Her hand touched his. "I want to help." He looked at her, eyes shining. "I was hoping you'd say that." Spring arrived gently in Pine Hollow. Fields that once lay brown and brittle now shimmered in soft green and gold. Wildflowers stretched toward the sun like hope reborn, and the sleepy town found itself stirred awake by something new. Just beyond the winding country road, where the old sawmill once stood, a new building had risen. Not grand, not corporate, but warm, purposeful, alive. A wooden sign carved by hand hung at its gate: the Hayes Center for Recovery and Resilience. Built from ashes, for those who rise again. Inside, the halls were filled not with silence but with voices. Gentle ones, survivors, patients, first responders. People who knew pain but refused to be defined by it. At the heart of it all was Clara Jensen, her hair pinned back loosely, her smile more certain now. She walked those halls with steady steps, stopping to speak softly with a burn victim adjusting to his new prosthetic, or to comfort a retired firefighter battling night terrors. And beside her, always, was Cole Hayes, no longer a ghost, no longer a story whispered in hospital corridors, but a man with sleeves rolled up, hands helping, shoulders carrying, and eyes that now sought only truth and healing. Masking, they weren't saving the world, just changing lives, one quiet act at a time. Their wedding was held on a cool summer afternoon in a meadow behind the clinic. No photographers, no guest lists of politicians or CEOs, just wildflowers, wood benches, friends, and those whose lives had touched theirs. Captain Ross Medina was there, wiping a tear discreetly from his eye as he stood near the makeshift altar. Dana Yu, Cole's lawyer, wore a sunflower pin and smiled wider than anyone had ever seen. Patients came too, one in a wheelchair, another walking for the first time without crutches. Clara wore a simple ivory dress with lace at the sleeves, her hair braided with white daisies. Cole wore a charcoal gray suit with no tie, a silver wedding band on his finger etched with one word: still. The officiant asked if they wished to speak their own vows. Cole looked at Clara and took her hands. "You whispered to me in the dark," he said. "When I had no name, no future, no voice, you gave me yours. You didn't know me, but you believed in me. You gave me something stronger than oxygen, stronger than surgery." He paused, eyes shining. "You gave me love, and that love became my way back." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. Then came her turn. "You were still," she said, "but you were never gone. I talked to you like you were alive, because in my heart, you were. Even when the world declared you lost, I knew you were there. I vowed I'd never forget you, because you mattered, even in silence." They kissed beneath the open sky, as applause rippled like wind through the flowers. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in lavender and amber, The celebration gave way to something softer. Stories around a fire pit, quiet music on an old record player, children chasing lightning bugs through the grass. Cole sat beside Clara, his arm around her shoulders, their fingers intertwined. He raised a glass of cider. "I used to think surviving the fire was the miracle," he said. "But I was wrong." Everyone quieted. "The real miracle was someone staying, long enough to remind me I was still here. It wasn't fire that changed my life. It was a whisper." He looked at Clara. "And I'll spend the rest of my life answering it." Later that night, they stood alone beneath the willow tree behind the center, the same tree where they first planned it all. "I never told you," Clara said, her voice low. "But the first night you moved your hand, I was already gone. I didn't see it." "You didn't have to," he replied. "You gave me the reason." The stars blinked above them like gentle beacons. They said nothing more, not be a juppy. Some moments don't need words. Some love stories aren't built from grand declarations, but from the quiet persistence of hope, of staying, of choosing to believe in someone long enough for them to believe in themselves. 5 years later, the Hayes Center had expanded to 3 towns. Each bore the same carved message at its entrance. Clara became director of emotional trauma services. Cole led fire safety outreach for underserved communities. They didn't chase headlines, but survivors across the state whispered their names with gratitude. Every year, on the anniversary of the Maddox warehouse fire, they didn't hold a press conference. They held a vigil for the truth, for those still healing, for the strength to keep rising. And at the very center of that vigil, they stood hand in hand, still, together. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.